The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Thanks to Mai. Good afternoon. Welcome to Mannin Line on Manx Radio. Open line through till 1. So the floor is yours, whatever you want to talk about. Lines are open on 66 13 68. Now, it may not be the biggest story in the world, but there are issues if you want a takeaway delivered. Some businesses on the Isle of Man say they're struggling to get fast food delivery insurance so they can deliver hot food takeaways. The difficulties apparently are UK companies, which pay their drivers per delivery, which allegedly causes them to take unnecessary risks on the road. But doesn't happen on the Isle of Man, does it? Surely not. Anyway, is that a sign of civilized society, being able to get a hot food delivery? Just a thought, and if you're involved in it, we'd like to hear from you. But Neil's on first today. Hi, Neil.
Good afternoon, Andy, and thank you. I listened with interest the other evening to Laurie Hooper, the Health Minister, giving a presentation on the pressure which our health services under dental, waiting lists, etc., etc., etc. I think he was saying they need another 38 million, sort of almost immediately, to sort of keep our current services running as they are. Otherwise, the threat is that there may be a charge put out to the local population, or they may have to reduce some of the services which they are providing. So that's what government is presenting on one hand. And then on the other hand, they turn around and they say they want another 15,000 people here. I can't see how the tax take from 15,000 people coming to the island is in any way going to balance out the huge amount of costs to our infrastructure projects. And Rob Collister was also on saying that our education service is under pressure. Currently, I think he said schools are running at 103%, which is obviously unsustainable. I just think the wealthy coming into the Isle of Man will facilitate their tax funding out through the quite legal transmission stations of trust allowances, etc. That's quite legal. Although it is avoidance, it might be immoral. It is in fact legal. And I can't see how the tax take from 15,000 people working here is in any way going to fix the infrastructure issues which the Isle of Man faces.
So what would you like, a straightforward kind of equation given by Treasury as to where the money's going to come from and whether or not this increased population would, as you say, facilitate that?
Well, yes, I would like to see that. Personally, I think the Isle of Man should be concentrating on its tourist sector. I mean, I'm off work today. I went into Douglas and I travelled through to Ramsey, and the tram going through Baldrine area was absolutely packed with people. I think the Isle of Man should be concentrating on its tourist sector. We still have some decent countryside left. And instead of a government allowing our heritage sites to fall into disrepair, I think they should be investing in them. I was quite appalled this year because I had two friends arrive from London, Simon and his wife, and they were here they stayed for 2 weeks for the Grand Prix Festival, went around on their bike for the last few days when the racing wasn't on. And I was chatting to them the day before they went back, and they'd been here before, but they hadn't been here for about 5 years now. And we just had a general chat about things, and the feedback was that they enjoyed the racing, they enjoyed coming here, that where they were staying was good, etc. However, they felt the Isle of Man looked tired, run down, and really rather shabby in many areas, and that's a bad indictment, really.
How did you feel, Neil, when your guest told you that?
I felt embarrassed. I felt really ashamed. I mean, I go to the airport because it's the nearest point for me to get some cash. I come out through the doors, and the very first thing anybody coming to the Isle of Man sees is, as Tony Brown summed it up when he was on, a potato field. I mean, that used to be a wonderful presentation, and it's first impressions that count. When you go to somebody's house, if the garden has 6 foot of weeds in the front, the curtains are torn, and the paint is flaking off the windows and the doors, your mind is already set before you are actually going inside the property. Your mind is set at that point. And I think the island looks absolutely so run down. It's terrible. And we're swamping it with people who, we seem to be losing the culture, losing the identity, and I can't see how any of this is going to add up in the future.
And you wonder why, if people try and justify that, if they say, look, we've got money to spend on other things, it's as though they think we don't remember when it used to be prim and proper and freshly painted and tidy.
Exactly. I mean, there used to be a sort of general spring clean. I'm old enough to remember when each parish had its own little gang of men going around. There was one in Maloo down here, one in Arbury, one in Santon. And they took enormous pride in line washing all the little walls, all the bare walls which were around the countryside, tidying up the hedges, making sure the verges were correct. Verges were nice and neat and tidy. Everything was sparkling, ready for inviting people onto the Isle of Man to enjoy their holiday here. And that just seems to have gone, and I think that's tragic.
Okay, all right. Well, I appreciate that. Thanks for calling today, Neil.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Good to hear from you. Jeff's on now. Hi, Jeff.
Hello, Andy. Nice to speak to you again. About fluoridation of the Isle of Man drinking water supply. In 2008 was the most recent time this was attempted by, I think, the Public Health Directorate, when the Director of Public Health, Dr. Parameshwaran Kishore, and also now deceased, unfortunately, nice gentleman, Dr. Paul Emerson, were promoting it. I'm very much against it. I also think that the establishment generally casually dismisses any sources of information that contradict their statements. The British Fluoridation Society, there was a man overarching that organisation, I think, who was interviewed on Manx Radio some months ago, and he was less than sympathetic to anything that was contradicting it. And I think he said there were 5% or possibly 5 million, I'm not sure which it is now, of people in the UK have got fluoridated water. And this is after 40 or 50 years of trying. One wonders why. Additionally, physically active people who will be consuming a lot more water than the average member of society will absorb more of this stuff, sodium hexafluoride, into their bodies. And there's a council minister's paper requesting the most expedient way to add fluoride to drinking water. That was some months ago. I think it's due to be presented to Comey in December. But the public is not being asked about this anymore, it seems. It seems as a sort of oligarchical organisation that's determined to foist it upon us.
I just wonder whether you think that this keeps coming up. Do you think this is something that government or the people who are supporting government, the civil service, that they've decided it's going to happen and they'll keep trying until it does?
I wouldn't be surprised, because the Council of Ministers also, it has a block vote in Tynwald, and Tynwald is not always obeyed in its wishes. Just consider the horse trams, for instance. I don't know exactly who's in charge of this. But Anne Call at MHK had a good statement a few months ago saying there must be other ways besides putting this stuff in the drinking water, which will also be spread by farmers onto their crops. So it'll be ingested by people in various ways. And there were two articles in the Courier. One was on the 7th of April this year, a new investigation into fluoridation of water, and the survey result was of 1,000 people who were asked about this. There was a substantial majority against it. I suspect that the establishment is afraid of this happening again and just not asking the people when they're trying to bulldoze it through the system.
So, for avoidance of doubt, you're completely against this?
Yes, I am indeed. It's mass medication. known to have dodgy side effects. There was an article in the Courier of the 14th of April by Mark Hepworth, who's the principal dentist at Abbey Dental. Now, I know the dentists have come out en masse in their organisation saying we're for it, but he was saying he didn't really like the idea of mass medication, popping it into the water. Lots of research on the safety of fluoride, but there's also lots of evidence of complications. And he said he doesn't want his kid drinking water that's got yet another chemical put in it.
Okay. All right. All right. We appreciate that. Thanks for calling us today.
Thank you, Andy.
Good to hear from you. 17 minutes past 12. And Wilf's on now. Hi, Wilf.
It's just a query, really. Somebody might come on and give me an answer. You know, we all know that how limited mileage you've got with one of these electric cars. So they brought out a hybrid. And then it says on the television, no, we got 550 miles now. But that's because you got a full tank of petrol or diesel, whatever it is that drives the electric motor to make it an electric one. But then in a few years' time, they say we're not going to make any more petrol or diesel engines. So where does your hybrid end up then? You see what I'm getting at?
I see, yeah. I would imagine they're still going to be making petrol engines and diesel engines for a while longer, Wilf.
Well, I would think so, because the world cannot handle it without them. We can't go on. Now, a fellow told me, I was talking to a fellow yesterday, mentioned about this, and he said, oh, when you buy a hybrid, they give you a guarantee that there'll be spares for 30 years. So we're not going to go 30 years into the future without stopping these making diesel and petrol engines. So they must be going to carry on. It's ridiculous.
I think half of it, Wilf, is half of these are actual wish lists. You know, when any government issues a target, sometimes part of that is a wish list. This is what we're hoping to do by a certain date. I mean, they're saying we're going to have a certain amount of renewables on the Isle of Man by the end of 2026. Well, that's only 2 and a bit years now. Yes,
it's total nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Another thing there's just been a fellow on about tourism and all that. The Laxey wheel and the tramway and the trains now, that's tourism now. The train and the tram they were put there, well, originally the tram was put there for tourism, but originally the train was put there to use as a train to do normal work. But the thing is, all these things, Charles Gard had been on, saying they're all run down, we got to look after them and all the rest of it, but they all take a lot of money to do this. And all these things we've got now are for tourism. And they will not pay unless you get the people who come over to go on these things. Then you can do these things up. But the reason we haven't got people to come over is because the steam packet's at the back of it. It's too dear to get here. If the price was put down, so the ordinary people, as I call them, like they used to be, could come and go on the train, go on the tram, sit on the deck chairs on the beach, do normal things, fair enough. But of course, there could be a downside. If you make it too cheap to get here, we could end up with a lot of deadheads over here from rough weekends and whatever.
Yeah, but the very good point you make is the fact that, as you say, the railways were built to actually do a job, and the railway, the track bed, the permanent way is of the most professional state. We only run heritage rolling stock on. They are perfect track beds, and we could run proper trams on if we wanted to. And I think there will come a point where we're going to have to decide, what do we want to do with our railways?
Well, yes, you can. We used to carry freight on the trams. When I was hunting rabbits, I got ferrets sent over from across on the tram. the tram would stop at your door and hand your freight to you. But that's all gone in the past. That's 100 years ago.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I would imagine ferrets won't be cargo these days. Will to be
yes, they used to. They came on a truck, locked in a truck, and you know. But all the livestock can come. I had motorbike engines sent down on the tram, all that sort of stuff.
All right.
And I remember one time the bus would stop to hand a bundle of papers at various places.
Yeah, you're right. The bus companies used to run parcels, didn't they?
That's right. Yeah, parcel service. Yeah.
Well, all right. Thanks, Will.
Different times.
Good to hear from you. Good to hear from you. Thanks for that. Vivian in Douglas, I don't know what the trouble is concerning ShopRite. Why should they tell the public what they're going to do? It's none of the public's business. If they want to sell out, they need to retire like everybody else. They were very good to my husband, says Vivian, when he worked for them before he retired. Nobody can work forever. Why don't the public and MHKs leave ShopRite alone? They've done a lot for various charities. Now it's time for their retirement. Thank you, Vivian. I don't think I've heard anybody criticising ShopRite. I mean, the company and the family behind ShopRite have been very, very faithful servants to the Isle of Man for 50 years, done lots and lots of community initiatives, supported Manx Foods. I think everybody's concerned what's going to happen next. What will happen, particularly with a company like Tesco, and they're extremely well-organised lawyers, people looking through contracts. They'll know exactly what they're going to sell on the Isle of Man. And it won't be just groceries. Let's get that straight. Tesco sell everything in their stores in the UK. So furniture companies over here, retailers of clothes and things like that will all be looking to the future. Tesco will know, with a virtual domination of the market on the Isle of Man, with 9 stores and plus the one they've got already, that's a very, very big footprint. They are a voracious company, a very, very successful company. They've had a few blips in the past, but they're very, very big. And this is unique for them. It's certainly unique for us. So we'll wait and see. But Vivian, let me tell you, there's been no criticism of ShopRite, certainly for their conduct over the past 50 years. And we wish them well, certainly the family behind it. We wish them well for the future. Treasury Minister hopes that negotiations between the Maritime Trade Union Nautilus and the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company will result in a mutually agreed solution, despite talks between the two being described as having reached an impasse, deadlock. The union previously told Manx Radio that the company is refusing to engage in a resolution via arbitration. It's since been revealed that the Manx Industrial Relations Service doesn't have a trained qualified arbitrator. It's not yet clear if this is the reason behind the company's alleged refusal to resolve the dispute, which would see staff told to remain on board the Manxman via arbitration. Well, we've contacted the Steam Packet for clarification, but yet to receive a response. The Steam Packet believes by making this change to workers' conditions of employment, it will enable greater service reliability and resilience. Nautilus maintains it's been threatened with fire and rehire if its members don't agree to the proposed terms, a claim which has been refuted by the Steam Packet. But the chief exec, Brian Thompson, told Manx Radio in an interview if workers don't agree to the new conditions, they could be told there was no longer a place for them at the company. Well, that story will go on, and we'll have to monitor that and see what will happen to the situation at the Steam Packet. It's certainly one that involves all of us on the Isle of Man. The power generation at Pulrose will be here until at least 2025. There will be no end of Pulrose Power Station. Remember, the government plans for it to remain until 2035. So that's 12 years away, well away, says Richie. Quite right that it should be retained until then, probably afterwards too, using spares, even if only as a backup for a supplementary source. A note in also that says ShopRite have had the old Strix site in Port Erin held on long-term rent as well. They used it for a ShopRite living for several years. We'll see what happens there. ShopRite have got lots and lots of things around the Isle of Man. The ShopRite chalets at the back of Victoria Road store as well. They got Centre House on Victoria Road. They are a very astute company and certainly prepared well for the future. Thanks also to Fran, who said the part of the problem of gaining insurance is that insurers aren't willing to take the risks. What do you know, Fran? What sort of risks are we talking about? What's happening to the Subway branches that are in the current ShopRite stores, says Jason. You would imagine, as Tesco don't run Subway stores throughout the UK, that Subway will probably be disappearing. And, of course, Iceland is inside that. So we wait, we watch, and we see there is 9 months or so, they say, until it will all be completely switched over. Thanks also to... it was Cherry who was talking about Cherry in Port Erin, who just says, I was very interested to hear the regarding the drugs on the Isle of Man and what's happening to the drug situation on the Isle of Man. Well, there's an organisation called Anyone's Family, Families for Safer Drug Control. They had a meeting in Douglas to discuss the Isle of Man's current approach to illegal substances. Anyone's Family, Families for Safer Drugs, believes that the drugs market and creating a controlled space with medical professionals available to advise and support users, it will reduce some of the risks that people face. It's not a pleasant subject, but let's face it, it's a subject that we are faced with on the Isle of Man, and that is the use of illegal drugs on the Isle of Man. Some very interesting comment at that meeting, including Ray Lakeman. Do you remember Ray sadly lost 2 sons in 2014 due to them purchasing MDMA on the dark web? So Ray certainly has a valid opinion as to what we should be doing on the Isle of Man regarding illegal drugs and the fact they're getting here and they're in the hands of organised crime.
We're seeing more and more young people getting involved, so we need to look at new ways to look after it. And I think that one of the ways that we can do this is by reforming the drug laws, taking the power away from organised criminals, and hopefully making a better future for our children. I think if our current drug laws worked and it was preventing the kind of accident that happened to my son, then I think that would be perfect. We'd be living in a perfect world. If you could actually stop people from selling the drugs to them, which are the current policies, then we'd be living in a wonderful world. But unfortunately, we live in a world where people want to take drugs, where there is a market for them, and that market at the moment is run by criminals who are making the situation worse, and it's our laws that are allowing this to flourish. It's a very, very sad case, but it won't be a unique case. These things are arising as a direct result of current policies. The fact that my boys were able to get their hands on drugs that were unregulated. Had it been a regulation dose and people know that their regulation dose exists, they would still be with us now. I'd much rather they didn't take drugs. There are people who will take drugs. We should be looking after them. We need to regulate. If they had had a regulated dose, they wouldn't be dead. They would be here with us now.
That's Ray Lakeman, and I just wonder if you've got any thoughts on that. It's heavy, it's a very serious subject, but something really that we have to deal with. Howard's with us now. Hi, Howard.
Hello, Andy. Just listening to you talking there about ShopRite, etc. Okay, they have been here for a long time, and you keep saying it's a family firm. It was started by Ken Nicholson, as we all know, and the family were deeply involved with it. But I know of 2 people, at least, who had major shareholders in it. And one of them, one was my uncle, and he was a major shareholder in the company, and somebody else is a friend of ours who was a shareholder in the company. My uncle's passed away many years ago, but the other person is still with us, and I don't know whether he is still a shareholder, but one of the incentives that the staff were presented with, if they'd worked extra time, overtime, what we term as, or whatever, they had a choice of having pay, time off in lieu, or shares, and they can have a shareholding. But people of my age and maybe a little younger will remember that ShopRite expanded into Scotland. And they even had their own aircraft here, flying senior management out virtually every day and back at night up to the shops in Scotland. And it went down, virtually bankrupt, and another firm took them over up in Scotland. They bought them out for next to nothing. The reference was, I just bought it with me pocket money. But they say it was a family firm. But I wonder how many of those people are still or have retained shares within the company and are getting paid out on the purchase or the rental for the 21 years for the ShopRite premises.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I'm guessing they were told if they were offered shares that the value of shares can go up and down, and also, different,
they did.
Different share issues can.
The shares that they got at one time when ShopRite went to Scotland. It brought the company virtually to their knees because the shares plummeted and they were virtually worthless. What they've come up to now, I don't know. I've never followed it. But if those people are still retaining shares, have they got a return on that money for what they had invested over many years? There's something you don't hear about. All these little things just lurking in the background. It keeps saying it's a family firm. Yes. As I say, one chap said it when they first started up at ShopRite, up where the centre house is, they were just pallets. And the stuff that came in on pallets, and I have delivered stuff there in the containers to the old stores. The car park as it stands now in Douglas used to have holiday cottages on. They were all demolished in the car park, but they were used for storage. Put that aside, that's just part and parcel of the company. But as I say, there was a lot of shareholders, so it wasn't wholly owned by the Nicholson family.
Yeah. I think I mean, I don't know about you, but I'll be sad to see ShopRite go. I mean, the fact is, it says proudly locally owned. It does have the Manx flag on it, and we've lost Ramsey Bakery. We're now, the ShopRite name is going, and also, it was a supermarket company based on the Isle of Man with all the skills and the people, the buying department and everything that went there. Centre House, the remnants of Cunningham's camp was even there at the moment. So it's a sad day, and the place feels, I don't know, maybe it's just me, it feels a bit less Manx.
Well, I was in the street this morning and I spoke to one lady who is Manx, same as myself. I was born here, raised here, and she said, you hardly hear anybody or know anybody in the street now. And this is unfortunately the way of the world. People are moving into here, and this is what's happening. They're getting into government, they're going into government, and they're changing it, or trying their best to change it back to what they've left. They want to move over to the island because of its beauty, its safeness, and everything else. And in the meantime, they want to change it back to something that they've already left.
Which is why I think that, anything that's Manx, Howard, it needs to be retained. I mean, I'm just talking about places like Manx National Heritage. Deprived of funds over the years. It's been, the funding has been cut, and they're trying to, get a quart out of a pint pot at Manx National Heritage. So.
Well, it's not so much the funds have been cut. Okay, yes, they have. But the enthusiasm for anything heritage within the government, and if you take that enthusiasm away, then you are in trouble. You've got to have people that are interested into it and ready to put that extra pound of flesh in. But if you only go in at 9 o'clock in the morning and you're knocking off at 5 o'clock and say, well, that's it, that's another day near my pension, and that is not the way to run a tourist industry. And we know, you'll know, we've been living on the island here for many years, when the tourist industry was declining, they said, and the words were, we'll just let it die on the vine. And they have done, and that's what we're left with today. Wilf, he said about people coming over with buckets and spades. Well, those days have gone. We've got to move on. And they want to introduce up to 500,000 people a year on holiday. There's very, very few places for these people to stay. And there's going to be one less at the planning has passed for knocking the Trevelyan down on the promenade. They're talking about knocking the back of that down, leaving the front, but making that into apartments. So the number of places to stay on the island is becoming less and less, and the government are less and less interested. They're going with the money, with the big businesses who want to make a fair few bob while the interest rates in the government are low, and they'll get a better return on the money by investing into property like that. But that's, as I say, the ShopRite interest, Isle of Man Enterprise, I think they were called, or something like that. They were a big conglomerate. They have fingers in lots of pies, and the foods section of it was just one part of it.
We'll see. All right. Appreciate that, Howard. Thanks for calling today.
Take care. Bye now.
23 minutes before 1 on Manx Radio. I was mentioning the situation with the steam packet company and the fact that the Treasury Minister, Dr. Allinson, hopes that the negotiations will result in a mutually agreed solution, i.e., does that sound like a compromise to you? Remember, Chief Exec Brian Thompson told Manx Radio in an interview if workers don't agree to the new conditions, they would be told there was no longer a place for them at the company. Brian Thompson.
I've got no intentions of firing anyone, lowering wages, none of those sort of practices. We simply want to change the business model and the terms and conditions.
But if people don't accept those terms and conditions, would they be told there's not a place for you in the packet anymore?
Yes.
So that, in effect, is fire and rehire, isn't it?
I think that's a rather cruel way of putting it.
Union representatives were recently on the island to gauge members' feelings. Treasury Minister Dr. Alex Allinson says the senior international organiser contacted his department for a meeting ahead of the visit, but this was unable to take place as he was off island at the time on parliamentary business.
Well, any thoughts on this? And what will happen to this? Brian Thompson obviously sees, he is the managing director, he's the chief exec of the steam packet, and so he is the boss, he decides. We've got the brand new boat, not entirely perfect yet, but we do have the brand new boat. And he has to run the company the way that he sees fit. He's the boss. Remember, he answers the shareholder is the Treasury, but the Treasury Minister wants a mutually agreed solution. We'll see what happens tomorrow. Home Affairs and Justice, Jane Paul Wilson, MHK, and Dan Davis, the Minister and Chief Exec, are going to be on Mannin Line. And I'd really appreciate your thoughts on the whole portfolio. And if you have any thoughts on, it's a very, very big portfolio, everything from road safety to police, obviously, constabulary, police complaints, licensing, parole, disclosure, barring, anti-money laundering is a big part of that, civil defence, emergency planning, prison, probation, fireworks this time of the year, important, and cyber security. So any thoughts and anything else you'd like to raise with Jane Paul Wilson, MHK, and Dan Davis? We're on Home Affairs and Justice tomorrow. And talking of what we used to call tourism, which we now call Visit Isle of Man, the chief exec of Visit Isle of Man and the chair are going to be on Mannin Line next Wednesday, so we can talk tourism with them and just see if we can bottom out where this 500,000 people are going to come from. Are we taking the existing tourists out of that 500,000? Are we taking cruise liners out of that 500,000? And if so, what is the number of new tourists that we're actually trying to attract? And is that seasonal? Is it for big events? Is it TT, Grand Prix? Is it other things? What's the strategy? Well, the Chief Exec of Visit Isle of Man, Deborah Heather, will be here next Wednesday, and the Chair, Ranald Caldwell, talking about that. And the week after that, Gary Cobb, the Airport Director, will be on Manx Radio, so we'll find exactly what's going to happen. Any thoughts on those drugs, by the way, and what we're going to do to combat? And at the moment, let's face it. Let's face a fact, and that is there are illegal drugs on the Isle of Man. There is cocaine, there is heroin, there's a lot of cannabis on the Isle of Man. It arrives here through nefarious ways. It is brought by criminals. It's supplied by criminals. And this organisation says that we need another way of handling this. If it's going to be here, the Families for Safer Drug Control, anyone's family it's called, they want the Isle of Man's current approach to illegal substances changed. They want to regulate the drugs market, create a controlled space with medical professionals available to advise and support users. They say it will reduce the risks. Eddie's with us now. Hi, Eddie.
Hiya, you all right?
Good, thanks. What's on your mind, Eddie?
I attended the meeting that the Cabinet Office represented in Ballabeg the other night.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, interesting meeting. One of the questions that was asked was, if, for instance, like a lot of countries now, including the British government, are looking for long-term alternatives to wind power, which is topical at the moment, would the British government, for one, are asking for innovation and companies to get stuck into water power, using the sea, reservoirs, rivers, so on, everything. They seem to be giving the impression that they don't think wind power will be viable for the future. A few reasons. One being that they're now realising that although people say they last for 25 years, quite a lot of them are now bringing that down to 15 years. Well, in 15 years, it means you've got to do it all over again. So it becomes a very expensive sort of way of doing it. But what was mentioned at the thing was that if the innovation does come, where water power becomes really reliable and so forth, would our government be willing to sort of do a U-turn and go that way? And one of the thing that was mentioned at the time is if we had to, instead of just rushing away headlong the way we seem to be at the moment, should we not sort of hesitate for a bit and hold back? Because we're not going to get these wind farms for another 4 or 5 years probably. But in that time, that very situation might happen where there is an alternative which is long-term and cheaper, better for the environment in every way, So I wonder how many people out there would be sort of the same mind as me by saying the government should hold back a bit. What do you think?
Well, I mean, it's not for me to have an opinion, but the fact is the government has given commitments to various renewables dates. Now, whether or not we will hit those dates is another matter, but it seems nowadays to kind of burnish your credentials, you have to announce targets, and we're saying at the moment by the end of 2026. Now, that may or may not happen. As you say, there are possibilities for the future. There's geothermal that hasn't even been given a turn of the wheel at the moment. And as you say, there is this talk of wave power and tide power that as yet doesn't seem to have taken off anywhere to any great extent.
Well, that's just it. It is taking off everywhere. It's up Shetland. It's all over the world. Everybody's trying it out now. I mean, it was on the international news the other night about how many different companies are going that way.
All right. Well, as you've mentioned it, I can tell you that I think it's the middle of November. We've got a guy on who knows all about ocean energy and getting energy from the ocean. He's going to be on Mannin Line. Clive Callister, one of the kind of senior people in industry on the Isle of Man, but he's worked, I think, in Australia. So we'll be finding that out next month and seeing whether or not we can actually harness wave and tidal power around the Isle of Man, Eddie.
Well, that'll be good. I'll be waiting to listen to that. We could do with somebody on at the same time with geothermal, and like a lot of people are asking for alternatives at the moment, and they're wondering why the government are not willing to even consider anything else. So that might be an interesting program.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Eddie. Good to hear from you, and let's bring on David now. Hi, David.
Hi, Andy. I just want to put the words out there. We're not in the UK, and I wonder where that's 50% of the trouble. And I just wonder when our government met the Labour Party, the Tories, the Liberals, what was said about to boost up the Isle of Man. We're a crown dependency. Our sovereign is the king, whether we like it or not. I know most people have views. I have some as well. But at the end of the day, when you're on the internet or you're searching for stuff, and you're searching sometimes for realistic bargains, do you know what I mean? And the one I wanted was for solar panels, PV panels. You fill all the forms in, and I know I've said it before, but what knocked us out straight away, not applicable in the Isle of Man. Their chest to say where we are. Oh,
yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you disappeared for about 10 seconds. Just tell us what you said again.
Oh, right, sorry. It was because we're not in the UK, we're a crown dependency, and all these things you get, like insurances. Maybe the guy that's having trouble getting insurances because he's living in the Isle of Man. When you're a UK company, maybe that you can get round that. But who's actually defending us in government with the Labour Party, the Tories and the Liberals when they're having cosy chats to say, wait a minute, we live in the Irish Sea, we're the centre of us, use us.
Do you think, would you see a Labour government as a threat to the Isle of Man next year, David?
Well, I'm probably a bit of a socialist. I would say no. I watch a lot of telly, what goes on in the world, and I think it probably would be good for England and maybe us to have a bit of a change. It's when I was in Parliament there, the Labour Party, the Tories and the Liberals never worried me a little bit, because the Isle of Man did its bit. It was renowned for doing things. We would our differences that make us different. Remember that, But now we're getting restricted because you can't do that because you live in the Isle of Man, in the UK, and all these things are coming about. But nobody seems to fight our corner to say where we are. And I just wonder what the team that went to the Tories and the Labour Party, and maybe a newsroom would try and find out, what did they talk about? Oh, was it a great place to come on holiday? Oh, you got your own boats now, haven't you? And then I can't...
Oh, you've disappeared again, David. All right.
Sorry, mate. We got arm's length companies now, which are the steam packeters one and the health service. The one on the health service, I'd get rid of them tomorrow. No problem at all. Cut them out, and we could survive. We had a minister and some members of a department. Let them do the jobs. And the steam packet should be told to get into meaningful negotiations. It's our boat. It's our arm's length company, and you can get an arbitrator that comes from the UK or Ireland to come over here and have binding arbitration.
Okay, all right. Thanks for calling.
Hey, boy.
Good to hear from you. Thanks for that. We're on Mannin Line today. We're open line. I mentioned that Jane Paul Wilson's on tomorrow, Deborah Heather and Randall Corwell next week, Gary Cobb towards the end of the month, and I did say that we're talking about renewables going to be in the middle of next month. Clive Callister knows all about ocean energy, tidal energy and wave power. We'll also have on that panel Lizzie Riley from the Manx Utilities, and also Steve Forden from DEFA, because there's a department within DEFA looking at renewables as well. So that's the middle of next month. So finally we'll get to the bottom of whether or not tidal power and wave power will actually work on the Isle of Man. And by the way, would you like to buy a pipe organ?
Autumn is a time for harvest, to gather a return, to reap a reward. So this autumn, join the others who have already made their savings grow. Make the most of your money at the Guernsey Bank Skipton International with the 5.75% AER fixed rate savings bond maturing 1st of January 2025. For details of all our savings products, call 01841 730 730 or visit skiptoninternational.com.
No withdrawals allowed until maturity. Interest is paid annually and upon maturity. Skipton International is licensed to take deposits by the GFSC and is a participant in the Guernsey Banking Deposit Compensation Scheme. See dcs.gg.
Spectrum Windows. If your house needs a new look and your windows let in rain, keep those cold breezes out and make it look like new again. Spectrum Windows, Spectrum Windows. Quality through and through. Great work guaranteed to you. Spectrum Windows, Spectrum Windows. Spectrum Windows. We are number one. We are family run. Mike's Motors. Mike's Motors.
All the nice motors are at Mike's Motors. From cars you can cruise in to motorhomes you can all snooze in. Whether you want to plug it in overnight or plug through muddy fields all day, no one has a better selection of quality used motors. So come and see why Mike's Motors are better by miles.
Mike's Motors.
Call 823 200. Click mikesmotors.im.
The Isle of Man is an island like no other, with so much to experience this autumn and winter right on your doorstep. Discover exciting activities, attractions, accommodation and food at discounted rates at visitisleofman.com/OYD23.
Get ready for another winning weekend on Manx Radio.
And this weekend, you could win £200 to spend at the Other Place in Ramsey, courtesy of Miller Chaps, the only place you need for a great new look for your home.
Visit manxradio.com and answer the competition question for your chance to win. You can enter as many times as you like.
And then make sure you join us for Manx Radio Breakfast on Monday morning to find out if you're the winner.
Make this your winning weekend with your nation station, Manx Radio.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
7 minutes before 1. I'm not joking. Do you want to buy a pipe organ? Because there's one that somebody's got one to dispose of. If you go to YouTube and put in St Paul's Foxdale, there's a YouTube of Gareth Moore, the omnipresent Gareth Moore, the Manx organist, demonstrating the one manual Hewitt organ in St Paul's Church in Foxdale. Well, the church is closed and they're looking for a new home for the organ. In 1979, the organ was thoroughly overhauled by Peter Jones, the organ builder, who's looked after it ever since. Mechanically, it's reliable, having given no problems of any kind. It's remarkably stable in tuning, and there's a recording. It's a freestanding organ, by the way. It stood unplayed in an unheated building for some years and just fired up again. It was tuned in December 2021. If you're interested in the possibility of taking this pipe organ, I'm not joking, from St Paul's Church in Foxdale, then Peter Jones is at Peter Jones Pipe Organs, all one word, Peter Jones Pipe Organs at googlemail.com, and we'll be loading that video up as well, but it is on YouTube if you want a pipe organ in your... This won't apply, by the way, if you live in a flat. Smoking cannabis is a choice of the individual person. It's well overdue to legalise it and stop criminalising people, says John. No mention of the Luton Airport fire today. Is that because it started from a diesel car, so doesn't fit in with the climate change denial agenda, said Steve. Regarding attracting tourists, says WhatsApper 232, we need to be relatable to the younger generation, not just nostalgic. Okay, that's a minority. The Welcome Centre, says this WhatsApper, should be advertising the virtual reality laser tag, mountain biking with outdoor centres and so on. We should consider things like a zombie run. No, me neither. And an arcade complex. We could do with younger people here. We don't just want older people. So, what's going to happen, do you think? regarding tourism. What do we do? How do we make it? How do we get an extra, how many? 100,000 odd people coming to the Isle of Man for the future. How do we attract tourists? Is it the price? Do we drop down the price? Do we cleverly market the place? Perhaps you've got the answer. 500,000 visitors. The street is filthy. This is Strand Street. 086 is talking about. The street is filthy. There is urine in various areas, even outside Marks and Spencer. The Villa Colonnade is usually dirty. What must our visitors think? These areas need washing every day. It should be treated as normal for this to be done. The people in, thank you, 086, another mention that just says the people in charge of this obviously have different standards to the rest of us. It used to be said, would you treat your own home like that? Parts of Douglas are unswept, unwashed, unkempt. Andy dropped a note in. We were talking about fireworks yesterday. November the 3rd, Douglas Borough Council have got... Oh, City Council, sorry. Didn't get the new stationery. I've got fireworks. Any ideas how much it's going to cost the ratepayers for the fireworks? That was a question, an existential question yesterday, on whether fireworks were actually worth it and we should be celebrating it. It seems the government are hell-bent on destroying Manx everything, as well as deforestation and draining the wetlands. Tomorrow, Home Affairs and Justice, Jane Paul Wilson and Dan Davis, and thanks to Chris Quirk on the phones today.
WINT